The boardroom was dark except for a single desk lamp casting long shadows across mahogany walls. December 15th, 1987, 11:47 p.m. The kind of late night where the city outside had gone quiet, where even Wall Street's wolves had retreated to their dens. Thaddeus Aldrich sat alone at the head of the conference table, 23 years old, MIT, MBA 3 months fresh, and tonight holding two pieces of paper that would determine the fate of 2,000 lives. Document A on his left, merger agreement, 67 pages of legal language that boiled down to one truth sign: here surrender the company his grandfather built in 1927 but save the jobs. The workers keep their paychecks. Their families keep their homes. The Aldrich name disappears from the building, but the building keeps running. Document B on his right. Chapter 11, bankruptcy filing. 32 pages that meant something simpler, and far worse: we tried, we failed. Everyone loses. 2,000 pink slips. Pension funds evaporated. A company town in Pennsylvania turned into a ghost town. Tad's pen sat between them. A Mont Blanc his father gave him on graduation day. Sterling Aldrich had gripped his shoulder that afternoon and said, "This pen built empire's son. Use it wisely." Tonight, wisdom felt impossible to find. Outside the boardroom door, he could hear them, Kyle and Donovan Morrissey. The twin brothers who'd spent 6 months circling Aldrich Steel Industries like sharks, scenting blood in the water. 35 years old, self-made, ruthless. And as of 3 hours ago, holding 50% of his family's company in their perfectly manicured hands. Tad closed his eyes, let his head fall back against the leather chair that had been his father's and his grandfather's before that. How did it come to this? 6 months ago, he'd been untouchable. The crown prince returning to claim his kingdom. Now he was a hostage negotiating the terms of his own surrender. And the worst part, the part that made his stomach turn, was knowing he'd walked into this trap willingly. Eyes open, ignoring every warning, his father's voice echoed in his memory from 6 hours earlier from the hospital bed where Sterling Aldrich lay recovering from his second stroke in 2 weeks. "They're wolves, Thaddeus. Wolves don't negotiate, they devour." But Tad had stopped listening to his father months ago. Stopped listening to the old man's warnings about corporate raiders and hostile takeovers and men who smiled with too many teeth. Because Tad was young, educated. He'd read the case studies at MIT. He knew the theories. He understood modern business in ways his father's generation couldn't grasp. Or so he'd thought. Now sitting in the dark with his inheritance burning to ash in his hands, Tad wondered if maybe his father had understood something more fundamental than quarterly earnings and market efficiency. Something about trust, about loyalty, about the difference between a handshake and a contract written in disappearing ink. The door opened. Cale Morrissey stepped through first, as he always did. Tall, lean, dark suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Salt and pepper hair combed back with mathematical precision. Everything about Cale Morrissey was calculated. Every gesture, every word, every smile that never quite reached his ice blue eyes. Behind him came Donovan. Same height, same build, same eyes. But where Kyle moved like a chess grandmaster contemplating his next move, Donovan moved like a prosecutor approaching a guilty verdict. Confident, direct, comfortable with other people's discomfort. "Still deciding?" Kyle asked. His voice was smooth, educated, the kind of voice that belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. "It's almost midnight, Tad. We need an answer." Tad looked up at them. Two men who'd spent 6 months becoming his friends, his mentors, his allies against a father who didn't understand the modern world. Two men who'd listened to his ideas about transforming Aldrich Steel from Rust Belt dinosaur to aerospace innovator. Who'd nodded and agreed and made him feel brilliant. Two men who'd played him like a violin. "You lied to me," Tad said quietly. Donovan raised an eyebrow. "Did we? You said you'd keep the jobs. 1,400 jobs. That was the promise." Cale moved to the window, looked out over Manhattan's glittering nightscape. "We said we'd restructure the company to remain competitive. Those were our exact words. You chose to interpret that as job preservation. We never corrected your interpretation. That's lying." "No." Cale turned back to face him. "That's business. We told you what you wanted to hear. You heard what you wanted to believe. The fault, dear Thaddeus, lies not in our words, but in your ears." Tad felt something cold settle in his chest. Recognition. This was the real Kyle Morrissey, not the thoughtful intellectual who'd discussed Rothko paintings at the Museum of Modern Art, not the visionary who'd praised Tad's strategic plans over scotch at the Yale Club. This was the man behind the mask, The corporate raider who'd built a fortune by buying struggling companies, stripping their assets and then walking away with the profits while communities burned. My father was right about you, Tad said. Donovan laughed, short and sharp. Of course he was. Sterling Aldrich spent 40 years in this business. He recognized us the moment we walked through his door. That's why we never bothered trying to convince him. We convinced you instead. The words hit like a punch because they were true. Every syllable. Let me walk you through the timeline, Cale said, pulling out a chair and sitting across from Tad. Not at the head of the table, not yet, but close enough to make the power dynamic clear. June 1987, you come home from MIT with a head full of theories and a heart full of ambition. You want to transform Daddy's company. Make it modern. Make it yours. Tad said nothing. July, we take our first position, 9.8%, just under the reporting threshold. Your father notices, asks questions, but you brilliant young Tad, you tell him not to worry. These are institutional investors. This is good for the stock price. Kyle leaned forward. August, I meet you at MoMA. Complete accident, of course. We bond over abstract expressionism. You mention you work in manufacturing. I mention I'm interested in American industrial renaissance. We exchange cards. 3 days later, Donovan runs into you at the Yale Club, another complete accident. He mentions his parents died in a factory accident. You feel sympathy, connection. We're not just investors anymore. We're people. We're friends. Tad's jaw clenched. September, we have dinner. I tell you, I see the same vision you do. Aerospace alloys, defense contracts, moving up the value chain. Everything your father is too stubborn to embrace. And you, Tad, you practically glow. Finally, someone who understands. Someone who sees your potential. Donovan picked up the story. October. Black Monday. The market crashes. Your stock price collapses. We make our offer. $85 million for 51%. Your father tells you to fight. But we've spent 3 months building trust. We've made you believe we're the good guys, the smart guys, the ones who'll finally let you prove yourself. So you vote with us, Cale continued. Actually, no. You abstain. You can't quite betray your father outright, but you can't support him either. Because deep down you think we're right and he's wrong. Tad felt sick. November, your father has his first stroke. Stress. The poor man's watching his life's work circling the drain, and his only son won't stand with him. We visit him in the hospital. We're so concerned, so generous. We'll pay his medical bills. We'll let him keep a chairman emeritus title. We're not monsters. We're reasonable businessmen. And you believe us, Donovan said, because you want to believe us. Because believing us means you're smart. Doubting us means you're your father's son, stubborn, old-fashioned, unable to adapt. Cale stood, walked around the table, placed a hand on Tad's shoulder. The gesture felt paternal, affectionate. It made Tad want to vomit. December 10th, you sign the proxy. Give us your family's 15%. Combined with our 35, we have control. And you think, finally, I can show my father he was wrong. I can prove I'm capable. I can save this company my way. Cale's grip tightened slightly. December 11th, this morning. We call the board meeting, and you learn what restructuring really means. Not aerospace alloys, not innovation, asset liquidation. We're selling the equipment, selling the real estate, selling the patents, closing both Pennsylvania plants. All 2,000 jobs gone. The company dissolved within 6 months. We'll clear $40 million in profit. Tad shrugged off Cale's hand, stood, faced them both. Why? His voice cracked slightly. He hated himself for it. Why go through all this 6 months of pretending to be my friend? You could have just made a hostile offer, fought it out in proxy battles. Because hostile offers are expensive, Donovan said flatly. Lawyers, PR battles, poison pills, white knights. Your father would have fought us every step. Cost us tens of millions and 6 months of headaches. This way you handed us the company, wrapped it in a bow. Your proxy signature saved us $20 million in legal fees. Plus, Cale added, it was more interesting this way. Hostile takeovers are crude, inelegant. Any thug with financing can launch one, but to convince a son to betray his father, to make him think it's the smart, sophisticated modern choice that requires artistry. Tad looked at them, really looked at them, saw himself reflected in their expensive suits and perfect smiles. 6 months ago, he'd wanted to be them, successful, confident, masters of the universe. Now he saw what that mastery actually meant. Not building, destroying, not creating value, extracting it, not partnership, predation. You're right, Tad said quietly. You're not monsters. Monsters don't know what they're doing is wrong. You know exactly what you're doing. That makes you worse. Kale smiled, actually smiled. Moral superiority, the last refuge of the outmaneuvered. Tell me, Tad, how does that righteousness feel? Does it keep the workers employed? Does it save the pension fund? Does it undo your signature on that proxy? It didn't. Tad knew it didn't. Sign the merger agreement, Donovan said, tapping document A. Make this easy. We'll give you $5 million in severance. You walk away, start fresh, young enough to rebuild. Or sign the bankruptcy, Kale added, touching document B. Play the martyr. Burn it all down. Either way, we win. We have the votes. We have control. This meeting is a courtesy, Thaddeus. We don't need your permission. We're giving you the illusion of choice because we're not entirely heartless. Tad looked down at the two documents. Two paths, both ending in the same place. His family's company destroyed, his father's legacy erased, 2,000 families thrown into uncertainty, and Tad himself marked forever as the fool who traded his birthright for smooth words and false promises. But then in the silence, a third option began to form. Not surrender, not martyrdom, something else. Something the Morrissey brothers hadn't considered because they'd so thoroughly categorized him as weak, manipulable, broken. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was all those things. But maybe being broken didn't mean being finished. Tad picked up his pen. Both brothers watched, waiting to see which document he'd sign, which form of defeat he'd choose. Instead, Tad pulled out a blank sheet of company letterhead, began to write. "What are you doing?" Donovan asked. Tad didn't answer, just kept writing, his hands steady for the first time in hours. When he finished, he folded the paper, slipped it into his jacket pocket. "I need 72 hours, Tad said. Kyle frowned. "For what?" "The merger agreement gives me 72 hours to review and sign. It's in the contract. Page 43, clause 17. I'm exercising that right." "Tad," Kale's voice carried a warning now. "Don't be stupid. You can't stop this." "Probably not," Tad agreed. "But I can try. 72 hours. That's all I'm asking. Then I'll give you an answer." The brothers exchanged a glance. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Kyle nodded. 72 hours. "But Tad," Kyle leaned close. "Whatever you're planning, it won't work. We've thought of everything, every angle, every move. You're a smart kid, but we're smarter. We've been doing this since before you could shave." "Maybe," Tad said. "Or maybe you've gotten so good at seeing people as marks that you forgot some marks bite back." Donovan actually laughed at that. "Brave words. Let's see if you can back them up. 72 hours, starting now." They left. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. Tad stood alone in the boardroom, his father's boardroom, his grandfather's boardroom. Soon to be nobody's boardroom because there'd be no company left to board. Unless... He pulled out the paper he'd written, unfolded it, read his own handwriting in the lamplight. A name. Warren Garrison, an old friend of his father's, CEO of Garrison Aerospace, a man who'd tried to partner with Aldrich Steel 3 years ago on an alloy project. Sterling had said no. Too risky, too expensive. Stick to what we know. But Garrett had seen the vision then. Maybe he'd still see it now. Tad checked his watch. 12:17 a.m., too late to call. But dawn came early for men like Warren Garrison, men who built things instead of tearing them apart. He gathered both documents, the merger agreement and the bankruptcy filing, slipped them into his briefcase. Tomorrow he'd need them. Need to understand every clause, every loophole, every word. Tonight he needed to think. Tad walked to the window where Kale had stood, looked out over Manhattan. 40 stories below the city pulsed with life. Taxis crawling through streets. Lights in windows where people worked late or couldn't sleep. Somewhere out there, 2,000 families were sleeping. Workers who'd arrive at the plant tomorrow morning, not knowing their jobs were already gone. Men who'd spent 20, 30, 40 years turning molten steel into I-beams and rebar. Women in the administrative offices who'd raised kids on Aldrich paychecks. Retirees counting on pension funds that would evaporate like morning dew. They trusted the Aldrich name, trusted that a company that had survived the Depression and 2 world wars in the steel crisis of the 70s would survive this too. They didn't know that Thaddeus Aldrich, heir to that name, had sold them out for the chance to prove he was smarter than his father. Tad pressed his forehead against the cold glass. I'm sorry, he whispered to the city, to the workers he'd never met, to his father lying in a hospital bed, heartbroken by stress and betrayal, to his grandfather long dead who'd started with one small foundry in Pittsburgh and built it into an empire through sweat and integrity and keeping his word. I'm so sorry, but sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't pay mortgages. Sorry didn't fund pension plans. Sorry didn't undo his signature on that proxy. Washington. That's what was needed now. Not remorse, not self-pity, action. Tad turned from the window, grabbed his briefcase, headed for the door. As he reached for the handle, he paused, looked back at the conference table, at the chair where his grandfather used to sit, where his father had sat for 40 years, where Tad had sat for exactly 3 months before losing everything. The empty chair seemed to watch him, judge him. I'll fix this, Tad said to the empty room, to the ghosts of Aldrich's past. I don't know how, but I'll fix this, or I'll die trying. The chair didn't answer. Empty chairs never do. But somehow in the silence, Tad felt something shift. Not forgiveness. He didn't deserve forgiveness, but maybe possibly a chance at redemption. He left the boardroom. The door clicked shut behind him. The lamp still glowed on the conference table, casting its lonely circle of light into the darkness. Outside, Manhattan slept, or pretended to sleep. The city never really rested, just shifted, transformed, rebuilt itself night after night, dollar by dollar, dream by broken dream. Tad stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for ground floor. As the car descended, he closed his eyes and began to plan. 72 hours, 3 days. Could he find an investor in 3 days? Could he convince Warren Garrison to gamble on a company that 2 of Wall Street's sharpest minds had already condemned to death? Could he outmaneuver men who'd spent 6 months outmaneuvering him? Probably not. But Cale Morrissey had made one mistake tonight. Just one. He'd given Tad 72 hours. He'd assumed Tad would spend that time wallowing, grieving, accepting the inevitable. Instead, Tad would spend it fighting. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened onto the marble lobby. His footsteps echoed as he crossed to the exit. The night security guard looked up from his desk. Burning the midnight oil, Mr. Aldrich. Something like that, Frank. Your father used to do the same. Many nights I'd see him leaving at 1, 2 in the morning. Man never seemed to sleep. Tad paused. Did he ever say why? Why he worked so hard? Frank thought about it. Once I asked him that. This was maybe 10 years ago. He told me, Frank, 2,000 families depend on me making the right decisions. A man doesn't sleep sound when he's responsible for 2,000 families. Then he patted my shoulder and went home. The words hit Tad like a hammer. 2,000 families. Not market cap, not stock price, not quarterly earnings. Families, people, lives. His father had never forgotten that. Every decision Sterling Aldrich made, he made with those 2,000 families in mind. Keep the plants running. Keep the paychecks coming. Keep the promises made to men who'd given their working lives to Aldrich Steel. And Tad, brilliant, educated Tad, had forgotten it completely. He'd gotten lost in vision statements and strategic plans, improving himself. He'd seen the company as a business problem to solve, not as 2,000 families to protect. That was the real difference between him and his father. Not old-fashioned versus modern, not stubborn versus flexible. Sterling Aldrich had never forgotten who he was working for. Tad had forgotten the moment Cale Morrissey started whispering in his ear about transformation and innovation, and finally getting the recognition he deserved. Thank you, Frank, Tad said quietly. For what, Mr. Aldrich? For reminding me what matters. Frank looked confused but nodded. Have a good night, sir. Tad stepped out into the December cold. Manhattan at 1 a.m. was a different creature than Manhattan at noon. Quieter, darker, more honest somehow. The facades came down. The pretense faded. What remained was the raw truth of steel and stone and people trying to survive. He started walking, not toward his apartment, not toward his car, just walking, thinking, planning. Somewhere in this city, Warren Garrison was sleeping. Tomorrow, Tad would call him, pitch him, beg him if necessary. Garrison Aerospace needed high-grade alloys for their defense contracts. Aldrich Steel could provide them, with investment, with restructuring, with vision. The vision Tad had tried to sell his father. The vision Sterling had rejected as too risky. Maybe it was too risky. Maybe his father had been right about that too. But at least it was a vision that kept people employed, that built something instead of destroying it, that honored the Aldrich name instead of erasing it from existence. Tad's phone rang. He pulled it from his pocket. His father's hospital. His heart seized. Hello, Bayan. Mr. Aldrich, this is Nurse Patterson at Mount Sinai. Your father is asking for you. He's stable, but he's quite agitated. He wants to speak with you tonight. Tad checked his watch, 1:47 a.m. Visiting hours were long over, but apparently dying men got to make their own rules about visiting hours. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hailed a cab, gave the driver the address, sat in the back seat watching the city slide past, trying to figure out what he'd say to his father. How he'd explain that yes, the warnings were correct. Yes, Tad had been a fool. Yes, everything Sterling feared had come to pass. But also, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to try. I know you don't believe in me anymore. I know I've lost your trust. But give me 72 hours. Give me one last chance to be the son you thought you were raising. The cab pulled up to Mount Sinai. Tad paid, entered through the emergency entrance, took the elevator to the cardiac unit. The night nurse recognized him, pointed toward room 412. Tad walked down the corridor. Hospital quiet, machines beeping, someone coughing 3 rooms down, the smell of antiseptic and recycled air. He reached his father's room, paused outside the door. Through the small window, he could see Sterling Aldrich in the bed. 78 years old, built like an iron worker because he'd been an iron worker before he'd been an executive. Started on the floor of his father's foundry at age 16. Worked every job in the plant before taking over at 35. A man who'd built his success with his hands before he'd built it with his mind. And his son had betrayed him for the approval of 2 men who'd never built anything in their lives. Just dismantled other people's creations and called it business. Tad knocked softly, pushed open the door. Sterling's eyes opened, focused on him. For a moment, Tad saw something flicker across his father's face. Relief, anger, disappointment. You came, Sterling said. His voice was weak, thin, nothing like the booming command it had been 6 months ago. You asked me to. I didn't think you would, not after this morning. This morning, when Tad had stood in this same room and told his father he was signing the proxy, when Sterling had looked at his only son and said, then you're not my son anymore. Tad pulled a chair to the bedside, sat. I'm sorry, Sterling closed his eyes. Sorry doesn't unsign documents. I know. Sorry doesn't save jobs. I know. Sorry doesn't give me back the company my father gave me, the company I was supposed to give you. I know. Tad's voice broke. I know, Dad. I know. They sat in silence. The machines beeped, measured heartbeats, tracked blood pressure, quantified a life in numbers that meant everything and nothing. Finally, Sterling spoke again. Why'd you do it, Thaddeus, really? Not the bullshit about modern business practices. Why'd you trust them over me? Tad looked at his hands, the same hands that had signed the proxy. Because I wanted to be smarter than you. I wanted to prove I could succeed where you were failing. I wanted, he swallowed hard. I wanted you to be proud of me. And I thought the only way you'd be proud was if I saved the company you couldn't save. So you gave it to men who'd destroy it. So I gave it to men I thought would save it differently than you could. Men I thought saw what you couldn't see. Men who made me feel brilliant instead of like a disappointment. Sterling's hand moved, reached out. Tad took it. The grip was weak, trembling. But there. You were never a disappointment, Sterling said. Frustrating, stubborn, absolutely. Too smart for your own good every damn day, but never a disappointment. You're my son. That means you're supposed to challenge me. Question me. Push back. That's what sons do. Tad felt hot tears on his cheeks. I destroyed everything you built. No, they destroyed it. You just opened the door. There's a difference, Ontot. Sterling squeezed his hand. You made a mistake. A big one. Expensive one. But you're 23. You're supposed to make mistakes. That's how you learn. This mistake cost 2,000 jobs. Maybe, or maybe it doesn't. Sterling's eyes opened again, sharp, focused. The same eyes that had stared down union negotiations and boardroom battles and 40 years of industrial warfare. You got 72 hours, Tad blinked. How did you know? Because I know contracts. I know the Morrisseys gave you an out. Small one, they always do. Makes them feel magnanimous. Gives the target rope to hang himself with. Question is, you gonna hang yourself or you gonna climb? I don't know if I can climb. They're smarter than me. Bullshit. They're more experienced than you. That's different. Smarter, you went to MIT. Graduated top of your class. You got your mother's brains and my stubborn streak. That's a dangerous combination if you point it the right direction. What direction should I point it? Sterling was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then Warren Garrison. Tad's breath caught. I was thinking the same thing. Of course you were. It's the obvious play. Only play, really. Warren wanted to partner 3 years ago. I said no. Too risky. But times change. Maybe risk is what we need now. You think he'd invest? I think Warren Garrison hates corporate raiders more than anyone I know. His father lost his business to men like the Morrisseys back in the 60s. Broke his heart. Killed him eventually. Warren swore he'd never let that happen to someone else if he could stop it. Hope flickered in Tad's chest. Small. Fragile. But there. He'll want terms, Sterling continued. Control, probably. Can't blame him. We're damaged goods now. But he's a builder. He'll keep the plants running if there's a viable path. What if there's not? What if the company's too far gone? Sterling looked at him, long and hard, then smiled, faint, sad. Then we go down fighting. But we go down honest. Not like this. Not selling out to vultures. We lose on our terms. Protecting our people as long as we can. That's the Aldrich way. Tad nodded. I'll call him first thing tomorrow. Good. And Thaddeus, yes. When you talk to Warren, don't bullshit him. Don't pitch. Don't sell. Just tell him the truth. You fucked up. You're trying to fix it. You need help. Warren respects honesty. He'll help if he can, but he won't help if he thinks you're playing games. No games, I promise. Sterling's eyes drifted closed again, exhausted. Get out of here. Let an old man sleep. You got work to do. Tad stood, still holding his father's hand. Dad. Yeah. I love you. I'm sorry I forgot that matters more than being smart. Sterling's grip tightened one more time, then released. I love you too, son. Now go save our company, or at least die trying with some dignity. Tad left the room, walked back down the corridor, back through the lobby, back into the Manhattan night. The sky was starting to lighten. Not dawn yet, but that gray pre-dawn where night admits defeat, but day hasn't quite claimed victory. The in-between time, when anything could happen. Tad started walking again, this time with purpose, direction. He had 72 hours, minus the 6 he'd already used, 66 hours to find financing, to pitch Warren Garrison, to outmaneuver the Morrissey brothers, 66 hours to prove he was his father's son after all. The city woke around him, delivery trucks rumbling, street sweepers humming, early shift workers heading to jobs. The machinery of New York grinding to life. Somewhere in Pennsylvania, second shift at Aldrich Steel was ending. Third shift starting. Men punching time clocks, heating furnaces, pouring molten steel into molds. Building. Creating. Turning raw ore into the bones of skyscrapers and bridges and ships. They didn't know yet. Didn't know their jobs hung by a thread. Didn't know the boss's son had gambled their futures and lost. But they would know. Soon enough, unless Tad could pull off a miracle. He looked east, toward the rising sun. Somewhere out there, Warren Garrison was waking up, having coffee, reading the journal, starting his day. In 6 hours, Tad would call him, make the pitch of his life. Not for his own sake, not anymore. For 2,000 families. For his father lying in a hospital bed. For the Aldrich name that meant something more than quarterly earnings. For the chance to prove that not every young man who makes a mistake stays broken. That some learn, some fight back. Some find redemption in the wreckage of their failures. Tad didn't know if he'd succeed. Odds were against him, but his father was right about one thing. Better to die fighting with dignity than to live on your knees signing surrender documents. The sun broke over the horizon. First light hit the steel and glass towers of Manhattan, turned them gold. For just a moment, the city looked like something from a dream. Beautiful, possible, redeemable. Tad Aldrich stood in that light and made a promise. 72 hours. He'd use every minute, every connection, every ounce of intelligence and stubbornness and desperate hope. The Morrissey brothers thought they'd won, thought they'd broken him, thought he'd sign their documents and slink away into wealthy obscurity. They were about to learn they'd misjudged him. Not because he was smarter than them. He wasn't. Not because he was more experienced. He wasn't that either. But because he had something they'd never understood, something they'd spent 6 months trying to corrupt and thought they'd succeeded in destroying. He had something to fight for beyond profit, beyond victory, beyond pride. He had 2,000 families, a father's trust to rebuild, a name to redeem. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. The phone rang 7 times before Warren Garrison picked up. Tad sat in his apartment watching the clock tick past 7 a.m. He'd showered, changed into a fresh suit, made coffee he couldn't drink, rehearsed his pitch 17 different ways, then thrown out the script and decided to follow his father's advice. No bullshit, just truth. Garrison. The voice was gravel and cigarettes. A man who'd spent 40 years shouting over the factory floors. Mr. Garrison, this is Thaddeus Aldrich, Sterling Aldrich's son. A pause, long enough for Tad's stomach to drop. Then, I heard what happened. The Morrissey takeover. Your father okay? He's in the hospital, second stroke, but stable. Hell of a thing, Sterling's a good man, didn't deserve that. Another pause. What can I do for you, son? Tad took a breath. I need to tell you a story. It's not a pleasant story, and I don't come out looking good, but I need you to hear it. Then I need to ask you for something impossible. I'm listening. So Tad told him. Everything. The approach at the museum, the dinners, the slow seduction of ego and ambition, the proxy signature, the betrayal, the asset stripping plan, all of it. No excuses, no spinning, just the raw truth of how a 23-year-old with an MIT degree and not enough wisdom had sold his family's company to wolves. When he finished, silence filled the line. You done? Garrison asked. Yes, sir. Good, because that was painful to listen to. Can't imagine how painful it was to live. A sound that might have been a sigh. Your father tried to warn you, every step of the way. But you knew better. I thought I did. And now you're calling me because you need a white knight, someone to ride in and save the day. Buy the company out from under the Morrisseys. Make your mistake go away. Tad closed his eyes. Yes, sir, that's exactly what I'm calling for. At least you're honest. A sound in the background, coffee being poured. Tell me why I should care. Aldrich Steel isn't my problem. Your family drama isn't my concern. I run an aerospace company. We do fine. Why should I risk capital on a sinking ship? This was it, the moment. Tad could pitch the business case, the synergies, the vertical integration opportunities, all the MBA language that sounded impressive and meant nothing. Or he could tell the truth. You shouldn't, Tad said. Business-wise, it's a terrible investment. The company's bleeding money. The facilities need upgrades we can't afford. The market's shifted against us. On paper, the Morrisseys are right. The smart play is to liquidate and move on. So why are you calling me? Because 3 years ago, you came to my father with a proposal. Partner on high-grade alloy development. Share the R&D funds. Create a supply chain for your defense contracts. And my father said no. Too risky. Too expensive. Stick to what we know. I remember. I thought he was wrong then. Still do. So did I. That's part of why I was so ready to believe the Morrisseys when they agreed with me. But here's what I didn't understand then that I understand now. Tad's voice steadied. My father wasn't wrong about the opportunity. He was right about the risk. Because the opportunity was real, but our company wasn't ready. We didn't have the capital, the expertise, the runway to survive the transition. If we tried it, then we'd have failed. And failure would have cost 2,000 jobs. And now we're going to lose those jobs anyway, unless someone intervenes. So the risk calculation changes. We've got nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Garrison was quiet for a long moment. You're asking me to buy a company from hostile raiders at an inflated price, pour money into restructuring, and gamble that we can execute a pivot that your father with 40 years of experience thought was too risky. Yes, sir. That's insane. Yes, sir. I'd have to be out of my mind. Probably, sir. Another pause. Then Warren Garrison laughed. Actually laughed. Deep and genuine. You know what I like, you kid. You've got balls. Calling me up, admitting you fucked up, and asking me to throw good money after bad. Most people would have tried to dress it up prettier. My father told me you respect honesty. Your father's right about most things. He was right about the Morrisseys, right to try to stop you, probably right that this whole thing is doomed. A breath. But he was wrong about one thing. Oh, what's that? The alloy opportunity. That was real then. It's real now. I've spent 3 years building relationships with subcontractors who can't deliver the quality I need. The defense contracts keep getting bigger. The specs keep getting tighter. I need a domestic supplier I can trust, someone with institutional knowledge of metallurgy, someone with facilities already built, even if they need upgrading. Hope flickered again. Stronger this time. The Morrisseys are offering the company for $95 million, Tad said. It's overpriced, probably worth $80 million tops in liquidation value. And how much do you think I'd need to invest in restructuring, retooling the plant's R&D? Tad had run the number 17 times last night. Minimum $30 million over 3 years, probably closer to 40. So I'd be all in for $135 million on a company that's currently worth $80 million. That's $55 million in downside before I make $1 in profit. Yes, sir. You got any good news in this pitch? The workforce knows steel. They're skilled, loyal. They'll work their asses off if they believe the company's trying to survive, not just extract value. That's worth something. It's worth something, Garrison agreed. Not sure it's worth $55 million, but it's worth something. Another sip of coffee. Here's my problem, Tad. Even if I wanted to do this, and I'm not saying I do, I don't have $135 million in liquid capital sitting around. I'd need to bring in partners. That takes time. Weeks, probably. You got weeks. I've got 66 hours. Garrison whistled. They really did corner you. Okay, let me think. The sound of a chair creaking, pacing maybe. I can probably pull together $80 million in 48 hours. That's what I'd be willing to pay for the assets anyway. But that's it. I can't get to 95. Not in your time frame. Tad's heart sank. 15 million short. Might as well be 15 billion. Unless, Garrison continued, unless you and your father are willing to put skin in the game, how much can you contribute? Tad did quick math. His trust fund, his savings, everything liquid he could access. I can get to 5 million, maybe 6 if I leverage some stock. And your father, he's got more, but he's in the hospital. I don't know if I can get him to move that kind of money on my word, not after what I did. Then you better be persuasive, because I need 10 million from the Aldrich family. You bring me 10 million, I'll bring 80. That gets us to 90. We're still 5 million short of their asking price, but maybe we can negotiate that gap. And if we can't, then you're out 10 million and I'm out nothing because I won't finalize without a deal. But at least you'll have tried. At least you'll go down swinging. Tad closed his eyes, felt the weight of it. Asking his father from a hospital bed to bet his life savings on his son's judgment. After that judgment had already destroyed the family company. It was too much to ask. It was the only thing to ask. I'll get you the 10 million, Tad said. You got until 5 p.m. tomorrow. That's when I need to commit to the financing. Miss that deadline and I walk. This only works if we move fast enough to catch the Morrisseys off guard. Understood. And Tad, yes, sir. Your father's a good man, one of the best I know. You broke his heart. You want to fix this? Start by making him believe in you again. Not with words, with action. Show him you learned something from this disaster. I will. Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Don't thank me yet. We're a long way from done. This might still blow up in all our faces. The line went dead. Tad sat holding the phone, staring at nothing. 5 p.m. tomorrow, 34 hours from now. He needed to convince his father to gamble $10 million. Then hope Warren Garrison could negotiate down the Morrissey's price by $5 million. Then hope the restructuring actually worked. Then hope they could survive long enough to see profits. A lot of hope. Not much certainty. But it was a chance. More than he'd had an hour ago. Tad grabbed his coat, headed for the door. Halfway there, his phone rang again. He checked the number, didn't recognize it. Hello, Tad Aldrich, a woman's voice. Professional. Clipped. Speaking. This is Jennifer Hayworth. I'm a reporter with the Wall Street Journal. I'm working on a story about the Aldrich Steel takeover. I was hoping you might comment. Tad's mind raced. The press. He hadn't even thought about the press. But of course they'd be interested. Morrissey Capital had a reputation. Any deal they touched made news. I'm not sure I have anything to say, Tad said carefully. Really, because I've been looking into the timeline. The proxy vote that gave them control came from your family's shares. 15%, that's unusual. Most hostile takeovers the family fights to the end. But you handed them the keys. Why? She knew. Somehow she knew. It's complicated, Tad said. Most things are, but here's what's interesting. I've covered Morrissey Capital for 3 years. They're good, very good. But they usually have to fight for every percentage point. This time the target's own son gave them control. That's a story. The question is, what kind of story is it? Tad understood what she was offering. She could write this as a tale of betrayal. Silver spoon heir too stupid to recognize raiders. The Aldrich family drama splashed across the business section, or she could write it differently. Off the record, Tad asked. On background. I won't quote you by name, but I can use the information. Close enough. The Morrisseys spent 6 months cultivating me. They identified my weaknesses, my desire to prove myself, my frustration with my father's conservative approach. They made me believe they were allies, partners, that they'd help me transform the company in ways my father couldn't see. And you believe them. I wanted to believe them. That made it easy. What changed? I learned what they actually planned. Not restructuring, asset stripping, liquidation, every job gone. The company dissolved, 40 million in profit for them. Nothing for anyone else. He could hear typing on her end. That's their MO. Nothing illegal about it. No, but I was stupid enough to hand them the company before I understood that. Now I'm trying to fix it. How? This was the gamble. Tell her too much and she could write a story that spooked Warren Garrison, scared him off. But tell her too little and she'd write the betrayal narrative. Make Tad look like a fool or a villain or both. Trust. That's what this came down to. Did he trust her to tell the story right? I'm working on finding alternative financing, Tad said. A white knight investor who'd buy the company from the Morrisseys and actually operate it. Keep the jobs. Honor the legacy. Who? I can't say yet. Deal's not done. Do you have 65 hours to put together a deal like that? Because my sources say the Morrissey agreement expires in 65 hours. So she knew the timeline too. She'd done her homework. Then I guess I better work fast. More typing. Then, Mr. Aldrich, I'm going to be honest with you. I can write this story 2 ways. Version 1, naive heir gets played by corporate raiders. It's embarrassing for you, but it's not uncommon. Happens all the time. Version 2, young executive recognizes his mistake and fights back. Tries to save his family's company and 2,000 jobs. That's a more interesting story, more sympathetic. What do you need from me for version 2? Proof you're actually fighting, not just talking about it. I need to see action, movement, something that shows this isn't just damage control, PR. Tad thought fast. Give me 24 hours. By this time tomorrow, I'll have something to show you. A real counter proposal, real financing, not a guarantee, but real effort. 24 hours. Okay. But Tad, yes, if you're bullshitting me, if this is just spin, I'll write version 1, and I'll make it hurt. The journal has a long memory for people who waste our time. Understood. I'm not wasting your time. We'll see. Call me by 9 a.m. tomorrow. You've got my number now. She hung up. Tad stood in his apartment coat, half on mind spinning. The press. Another variable. Another risk, but maybe also an opportunity. If Garrison came through, if they could put together a real counterproposal, then having the journal write about it could help. Public pressure, make the Morrisseys look like the villains they were, but only if it worked. If it failed, the publicity would just make the failure more spectacular. Nothing for it now but to move forward. Tad finished putting on his coat, grabbed his briefcase, headed out. He had a father to convince. The hospital was quieter during the day. Different staff, different energy. Visiting hours meant families clustered in rooms speaking in hushed tones, pretending everything would be okay. Tad took the elevator to the 4th floor, walked the familiar corridor to room 412, knocked softly. Come in. Sterling Aldrich was sitting up in bed reading the journal. He looked better than last night. Color in his face, strength in his voice. You made the call, Sterling asked without preamble. I did. Garrison's interested, conditionally. Conditions being, he can raise 80 million in 48 hours. He needs us to contribute 10 million. That gets us to 90. We're still 5 million short of the asking price, but he thinks he can negotiate that gap. Sterling set down the newspaper. 10 million, between us. I can get 6, maybe 7 if I push. That means you need to come up with 3 or 4. Everything I have liquid is tied up in Aldrich steel stock, which is currently worthless thanks to the Morrissey takeover announcement. I'd have to liquidate other positions, retirement accounts, the house in Connecticut. I know what I'm asking. Do you? Sterling's voice hardened slightly. You're asking me to bet my life savings on a plan you came up with. After you destroyed the company with the last plan you came up with. After you ignored every warning I gave you. After you chose the Morrisseys over your own father. Tad sat down heavily. You're right, this is insane. I have no right to ask you this. No right to expect you to trust me. I'll call Garrison back. Tell him we can't do it. I didn't say no. Tad looked up. Sterling was watching him, studying him, the way he used to when Tad was a kid and had broken something, trying to determine if the lesson had been learned. You made a mistake, Sterling said. Big one, expensive one, but you're trying to fix it. That counts for something. Question is, are you trying to fix it for the right reasons? What are the right reasons? Not ego, not trying to prove you're smart, not trying to make yourself look good. Those are the reasons you got into this mess. Are they the reasons you're trying to get out? Tad thought about it, really thought. Was this about redemption, about proving himself, about ego wrapped in noble intentions, or was it about something deeper? I keep thinking about Frank, Tad said, the night security guard. Last night when I left the office, he told me something. He said you used to work late all the time. He asked you once why you never seemed to sleep. You told him it's because 2,000 families depend on you making the right decisions. A man doesn't sleep sound when he's responsible for 2,000 families. Sterling's expression softened slightly. I forgot that, Tad continued. I got so focused on market position and strategic vision and proving I could transform the company that I forgot we're not just a company. We're 2,000 families, people with mortgages and kids in retirements, people who trusted us, trusted the Aldrich name to keep the promises made to them. And now you remember. Now I remember, and I can't let them down. Not if there's any chance to prevent it. Even if that chance is small, even if it costs everything we have. Because you taught me something, Dad. Maybe I didn't learn it until now, but you taught it. The Aldrich name means something. It means you keep your promises. You protect your people. You don't abandon ship just because the waters get rough. Sterling was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for the bedside table, pulled out a checkbook, started writing. What are you doing? Tad asked. Writing you a check for $4 million. It's everything liquid I can access in the next 24 hours. You said you need 10 million total. 4 from me, 6 from you. We're still short, but it's a start. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do, because you're right. The Aldrich name means something. It means when you make a promise to 2,000 families, you keep it. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He tore out the check, handed it to Tad. But I'm not giving you this because I think the plan will work. I'm giving it to you because you're trying for the right reasons. That's worth $4 million right there. Tad took the check, stared at it. $4 million. His father's retirement, his security, his nest egg. All of it bet on Tad's judgment, the same judgment that had failed so catastrophically a week ago. I won't let you down, Tad said. You might. This might fail. Garrison might not pull it off. The Morrisseys might outmaneuver us. All of that's possible. But at least we'll fail trying to do the right thing. That's better than succeeding at the wrong thing. Tad folded the check, put it in his wallet. I should let you rest. I've got a lot of work to do. One more thing. Yes, Sterling gestured to the newspaper. Page 17, bottom of the business section, small article. You should read it. Tad picked up the journal, flipped to page 17, found the article. Morrissey Capital faces scrutiny over asset stripping pattern. The piece was short, 3 paragraphs, but it outlined Morrissey Capital's history. 8 companies acquired in 5 years. All of them liquidated, assets sold, workforces dismissed, communities devastated. Legal? Yes. Ethical? The article left that question hanging. Jennifer Hayworth wrote this, Tad said. Same reporter who called you. How did you know she called me? Because I called her first this morning. Told her she should look into the Aldrich situation. Told her my son might have a story to tell. Sterling smiled slightly. I might be old-fashioned Thaddeus, but I'm not stupid. Public pressure can be a weapon, especially against men like the Morrisseys who care about their reputation. Tad stared at his father. You're playing the press. I'm using every tool available, same as they did. They used your ego and ambition. We'll use public opinion and journalistic scrutiny. All's fair. I thought you didn't believe in fighting dirty. I don't believe in fighting dirty against honest opponents. The Morrisseys aren't honest. They're predators. You fight predators with whatever weapons you have. Sterling settled back into his pillows, suddenly looked tired. Now get out of here. Go put together your deal. Make me proud, or at least make me not regret this check. Tad stood, moved to the door, paused. Dad, yeah, thank you for believing in me, even when I don't deserve it. You're my son. I'll always believe in you, even when you're being an idiot. especially when you're being an idiot. That's what fathers do. Tad left the room with tears in his eyes and a check for $4 million in his wallet. The war wasn't over, wasn't even close to over, but at least now he had ammunition. Back in his apartment, Tad spread papers across his dining room table. Financial statements, asset valuations, Garrison's preliminary offer. The Morrissey merger agreement with all its clauses and conditions. He needed $6 million more. His trust fund was $3 million. Liquid savings another $500,000. Stock options from his brief time at Aldrich Steel, maybe $1 million if he sold immediately. That got him to $4.5 million. Still short. He picked up the phone, called his broker. Marcus, it's Tad Aldrich. I need you to liquidate everything. Trust fund stocks options, everything. I need it converted to cash in the next 12 hours. Everything, Marcus sounded shocked. Tad, that's your entire safety net. Your mother set up that trust specifically to. I know what my mother intended. Right now, I need cash more than safety. Can you do it? A pause. I can do it, but the market's down. You'll take a haircut on some of these positions. Probably lose 10% off the top. How much total? 4.2 million, maybe 4.3 if we're lucky. Still short. He needed 6 million, only had 4.2. Tad thought fast. What else did he have? The apartment, but that would take weeks to sell. His car, worth maybe 50,000, not enough. Then he remembered the signing bonus from Aldrich Steel. He'd taken 100,000 when he joined as VP. It was sitting in a separate account untouched. He'd planned to use it for a down payment on a bigger place. That brought him to 4.3 million, still short by 1.7 million. Tad stared at the numbers. So close, so impossibly far. His phone rang. Unknown number again. Hello. Mr. Aldrich, this is David Chen. I'm a partner at Ashford Ventures. We're a small private equity fund focused on industrial turnarounds. I'm sorry I read Jennifer Hayworth's article this morning about Morrissey Capital's pattern. Then I made some calls, found out you're trying to put together a counter-proposal with Warren Garrison. That true? Tad's pulse quickened. Who told you that? I have sources. Banking is a small world. Question is, do you need additional capital? Why would you care? Because I hate corporate raiders. My father lost his manufacturing business to men like the Morrisseys. Broke his family. Watching it happen to someone else pisses me off. So I'm prepared to make an offer. $2 million. Equity stake in the restructured company. I want board representation and quarterly reporting. But I'll move fast. Money can be wired today. $2 million, exactly what he needed. Tad's mind raced. Was this legitimate or another trap, another Morrissey-style manipulation? What's your angle? Tad asked bluntly. What do you get out of this besides feel-good revenge? Chen laughed. Smart question. Here's the truth. If Garrison's plan works, if you successfully pivot to aerospace alloys, the company could be worth $300 million in 5 years. My $2 million buys me what, 3%? That's potentially a $9 million return. Not bad. And if it fails, then I'm out $2 million. I can afford that. What I can't afford is watching another family business get dismembered by private equity vultures and doing nothing about it. I need to verify you're real, that you have the capital. Of course, I'll send you our fund documents, banking references, call anyone you want. But I need an answer by 3 p.m. today. That's when I have to commit the capital elsewhere. 3 p.m., 5 hours from now. Send me the documents. I'll verify and call you back within 2 hours. Fair enough? Check your email in 5 minutes. The line went dead. Tad sat frozen. Was this really happening? A random investor calling out of the blue with exactly the money he needed. It felt too convenient, too perfect. But then again, Hayworth's article had gone live this morning. If Chen was telling the truth, if he really did have sources in the banking world, he could have heard about Garrison's involvement, could have put 2 and 2 together. The email arrived. Tad opened it. Fund documents, certified financials, references from 3 major banks, a list of previous investments. He started calling, verifying. Each reference checked out. Ashford Ventures was real. Small, but legitimate. David Chen was listed as a partner. His background was Stanford MBA, 10 years at Goldman Sachs, 5 years running his own fund. The previous investments were interesting. All industrial companies, all turnarounds. 2 had succeeded, 3 had failed, but none had been liquidated. Even in failure, Chen had tried to find buyers who'd keep operations running. He was who he said he was. The question was whether his offer was genuine. Only one way to find out. Tad called him back. Chen, it's Tad Aldrich. I verified your credentials. They check out. But I need to understand something. Why me? Why this deal? There are hundreds of companies in distress. Why jump into this one? Chen was quiet for a moment. You want the real answer always. Because you remind me of myself 20 years ago, young, cocky, thought I knew better than everyone else, got played by people smarter and more ruthless, cost my father his business. I spent a decade learning from that mistake. Now I use what I learned to help other people not make the same errors. Call it penance, call it therapy, call it whatever you want. But this is what I do. I find situations where ego met reality and reality won. Then I help reality build something better. The words hit hard because they were true. That was exactly what had happened. Ego met reality. Reality won. 2 million, Tad said. 3% equity, board seat, quarterly reporting. Anything else? One condition. If this deal goes through, if we save the company, you work there for at least 5 years. No jumping ship to another opportunity. No cashing out early. You see this through. You owe those 2,000 families that much. Agreed. Then send me the wire instructions. You'll have the money in 2 hours. Tad sent the information. Hung up, sat staring at his phone. In the space of 12 hours, he'd gone from hopeless to having a real chance. Warren Garrison with 80 million. His father with 4 million. His own assets with 4.3 million. David Chen with 2 million. Total 90.3 million. Still 5 million short of the asking price. But close enough to negotiate. Close enough to fight. Now came the hard part. Actually convincing the Morrissey brothers to take less than they wanted. Tad pulled out his phone, dialed the number he'd been dreading. K.L. Morrissey. It's Thaddeus Aldrich. I have a counter-proposal. Silence, then a laugh, sharp and cold. A counter-proposal. How quaint. You have 60 hours left on your deadline, Tad. What makes you think I'd entertain a counter-proposal? Because I have 90 million in committed financing. Real money, real investors, ready to close within 48 hours. You can take 90 million clean and walk away. Or you can hold out for 95 million and risk this turning into a public fight. More silence, calculating silence. Who's your financing? Warren Garrison leads the consortium. Ashford Ventures, Aldrich Family Capital, all verified, all committed. Garrison. Cale's voice changed slightly, less amused, more interested. Warren Garrison wants to buy Aldrich Steel. To operate it, not liquidate it. He has defense contracts that need domestic steel alloy suppliers. This fits his vertical integration strategy. And he's willing to pay 90 million for a company worth 80 million in liquidation. He's willing to pay for the opportunity, the workforce, the institutional knowledge, things you don't value because you don't build anything. A sharp intake of breath. Tad had struck a nerve. Careful, Thaddeus. I'm still holding all the cards here. Are you? Because I just got off the phone with Jennifer Hayworth at the Journal. She's writing a follow-up to this morning's piece about Morrissey Capital's pattern of asset stripping, about promises made to communities and broken, about short-term profit versus long-term value creation. She asked me for comment. And what did you tell her? Nothing yet. But if this turns into a protracted fight, if you reject a reasonable offer and hold them out for maximum extraction, that's a story. A story that makes you look like exactly what you are. Predators who destroy for profit. We don't care about PR. Yes, you do. You care deeply. Because your next deal and the one after that, they all depend on people trusting you. Bankers, investors, target companies. Every article like this makes that trust harder to earn, makes your next acquisition more expensive, more complicated. Cale was quiet. Tad could practically hear him thinking, calculating, running scenarios. 90 million, Cale finally said. That's your offer. That's our offer. Take it or leave it. But decide fast, because Garrison needs an answer by 5 p.m. today. After that, he withdraws. And you're back to liquidation, which will take months. Cost legal fees. Maybe get challenged by the unions. Your 40 million profit becomes 35 million. Maybe less. You've been busy. I learned from the best. You taught me how to find leverage, how to create pressure, how to make people choose between bad options. Congratulations. I'm a good student. A sound that might have been respect, or might have been annoyance. Let me talk to Donovan. I'll call you back in 1 hour. 1 hour, then I need an answer. The line went dead. Tad set down his phone. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the sheer audacity of what he'd just done. He'd bluffed, hard, made it sound like everything was locked in. certain, inevitable. In reality, it was fragile. Chen's money wasn't wired yet. Garrison's commitment was conditional. His own assets weren't liquidated. Any piece could fall apart. But the Morrisseys didn't know that. They only knew he sounded confident, prepared, dangerous. Sometimes confidence was enough. Tad's phone buzzed. Text message from Warren Garrison. Heard you're negotiating with them. Don't promise anything I haven't agreed to. But good luck. You've got guts, kid. Another buzz. Jennifer Hayworth. My editor wants the follow-up story for tomorrow's edition. Need your comment by 8 p.m. tonight. What should I write? Tad stared at both messages. The walls were closing in. Everything was moving fast. Too fast. But that was good. Speed created mistakes. Created opportunities. He texted Garrison back, not promising anything, just making them think twice about holding out. Then Hayworth, give me until 9 p.m. I'll have something for you. 1 hour until Kyle called back. 8 hours until Hayworth's deadline. 16 hours until Garrison needed final commitment. Tad stood, walked to his window, looked out over Manhattan. Somewhere in this city, Cale and Donovan Morrissey were having a conversation. Weighing options, calculating risk versus reward. They'd taught him how to manipulate, how to find pressure points, how to make people believe what you wanted them to believe. Now he was using those lessons against them. The irony wasn't lost on him. His phone rang, exactly 58 minutes after Kyle said he'd call back. Tad let it ring 3 times. Didn't want to seem too eager. Aldrich, it's Kyle. Donovan and I discussed your offer. A pause. We'll take it, 90 million. But we have conditions. Tad's heart hammered. What conditions? First cash only, no stock, no earnouts, 90 million wired to our account within 48 hours. Agreed. Second, you personally guarantee the financing is real. If Garrison backs out, if Chen backs out, if any piece falls apart, you're liable for our costs. Legal fees, opportunity costs. We'll sue you for everything you have and everything you'll ever earn. That was the trap, the hook inside the bait. How much are we talking? Tad asked. 5 million. Liquidated damages if the deal falls through due to your financing collapse. 5 million. Everything he'd scraped together, plus debt he'd carry for life. But if he said no, they'd walk, hold out for 95 million. Or just liquidate and take their 40 million profit while 2,000 families burned. Agreed, Tad said, on one condition. You're not in a position to make conditions. I am if you want this done fast. My condition is simple. You agree to employee retention for 90 days post-close. Gives Garrison time to restructure without mass layoffs. Anyone who wants to leave can leave with severance, but no forced terminations for 3 months. Silence. That's not how these deals work. Donovan's voice. He must have been listening on speaker. It's how this one works. You get 90 million clean. I take personal liability. Garrison gets his company. The workers get 90 days to figure out their futures instead of walking into a surprise massacre. Everyone wins something. More silence. Then Cale, 60 days. Not 90. And only for non-management positions. We're not paying executive salaries for people who aren't needed. 75 days. Non-management positions. Final offer. A pause that felt like hours. Fine. 75 days. We'll have our lawyers draft the agreement. You have 48 hours to close, or you're on the hook for 5 million in liquidated damages. Understood. Send the paperwork. The line went dead. Tad sat down hard, felt like he'd just run a marathon or fought a war. He'd done it, negotiated a deal, saved 5 million on the purchase price, got employee protections. But he'd also put himself on the hook for 5 million if anything fell through. Everything now depended on Warren Garrison following through, on David Chen's wire hitting the account, on his own assets liquidating successfully. One domino falls, they all fall, and Tad loses everything. His phone buzzed. Email from the Morrissey legal team, paperwork, dense and complex and full of traps. He'd need a lawyer. But lawyers took time he didn't have. Tad called the one person he knew who could read this fast and tell him if he was about to sign his life away. Garrison, it's Tad, they agreed, 90 million. But I need you to look at paperwork. Make sure I'm not walking into a trap. Send it over. I'll have my legal team review. But Tad, yes, sir. You just personally guaranteed 5 million you don't have. If this falls apart, you're bankrupt. You understand that? I understand. And you're okay with buying that risk. Tad thought about his father in a hospital bed writing a $4 million check, About 2,000 families who didn't know their jobs hung by a thread. About Frank, the security guard, saying his father never slept because he felt responsible. I'm okay with it, Tad said, because if I'm not willing to risk everything, I have no right asking anyone else to risk anything. Garrison was quiet. Then, your father raised you right, even if it took you a while to figure that out. Send the paperwork. We'll make sure you don't get screwed, at least not more than necessary. Tad sent the files, then collapsed on his couch. 63 hours ago, he had been sitting in a dark boardroom, contemplating surrender. Now he had a deal. Fragile, conditional, risky as hell. But a deal. The war wasn't over. The hard part, actually executing, still lay ahead. But at least now he was fighting. And sometimes that's all you can ask for. The chance to fight for the right reasons. The chance to prove that broken doesn't mean finished. The chance to show 2,000 families that the Aldrich name still means something. Still means keeping promises. Still means protecting your people. Still means going down swinging if you have to go down at all. Tad closed his eyes, felt exhaustion wash over him. 46 hours until closing. 46 hours to pull off a miracle. He'd need every second. 42 hours left. Tad sat in Warren Garrison's office on the 53rd floor of the Chrysler Building. Behind Garrison's desk, floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan like a painting. The city stretched out in every direction. Steel and glass and ambition piled high enough to scrape heaven. Somewhere down there, in those canyons of concrete and commerce, the Morrissey brothers were preparing their own paperwork, counting their 90 million, thinking they'd won. They hadn't won yet. The structure is solid, Garrison said, reviewing the merger documents his lawyers had marked up in red ink. But there are landmines. Clause 17 gives them the right to back out if any material adverse change occurs in the company's financial condition before closing. What counts as material adverse change? Anything they decide counts. It's intentionally vague. If a major customer cancels a contract tomorrow, they can claim Mac and walk. Keep your $5 million in damages. Tad's stomach tightened. Can we change it? We can try, but they'll fight it. Mac clauses are standard in these deals. Question is how broadly it's defined. Garrison flipped through more pages. Here's another problem. Clause 23, representations and warranties. You're personally guaranteeing that all financial statements provided are accurate and complete. If they find any discrepancy, any accounting error, they can claim fraud and sue. Our books are clean. Your books are 40 years of industrial accounting done by a small-town CPA. There are guaranteed discrepancies. Maybe not fraud. Maybe just different interpretations of depreciation schedules or inventory valuation. But the Morrisseys will use anything they find as leverage to renegotiate or walk. So what do? Garrison leaned back in his chair, lit a cigarette despite the no-smoking sign on the wall. We accept the risk because we don't have time to negotiate every clause. We're playing speed chess against opponents who prepared for months. Best we can do is identify the kill shots and try to defuse them. And if we can't, then you're out $5 million and I'm out $80 million in committed capital I could have deployed elsewhere. We both lose. The workers lose. The Morrisseys win. He took a drag, let smoke curl toward the ceiling. But that's business. Sometimes you take the shot knowing the odds are bad because the alternative is accepting certain defeat. David Chen spoke up from the corner where he'd been reviewing financial projections. The restructuring timeline is tight. You're proposing to retool plant number 2 for aerospace alloy production within 18 months. That's aggressive. It's necessary, Garrison replied. I have defense contracts that need domestic suppliers. Current vendors can't meet quality specs. If Aldrich can deliver, there's a guaranteed market, but only if we move fast. Defense procurement moves slow. Manufacturing has to move slower. We thread the needle or we miss the window. What's the revenue projection? Chen asked. Year 1 break even. We'll be in transition. Year 2, 20 million EBIT if we execute. Year 3, 40 million. Year 5, if everything works, we're looking at 100 million EBIT on 300 million in revenue. And if it doesn't work, Garrison stubbed out a cigarette, then we have an $80 million steel company in a declining market with aging facilities and no competitive advantage. We bleed money for 3 years and sell for 40 million. I lose 40 million. Chen loses most of his 2 million. Tad loses everything. The workers get laid off anyway, just slower. The room was quiet, the weight of those numbers hanging in the air like smoke. But, Garrison continued, I don't think that happens. You know why? He looked directly at Tad. Why bum? Tad asked. Because you're scared shitless, and scared people work harder than confident people. You're not doing this because you think you'll win. You're doing this because you can't live with yourself if you don't try. That kind of desperation breeds the kind of commitment that actually makes impossible things happen. Tad didn't know if that was a compliment or an observation. Maybe both. We need to talk about management, Chen said. Post-close who runs what? I'll be CEO, Garrison said flatly. Non-negotiable. This only works if I have full operational control. Tad, you'll be COO reporting to me. You handle day-to-day at the plants. Chen, you get a board seat and monthly reporting. Sterling stays on as chairman emeritus if he wants it. Largely ceremonial, but it keeps the Aldrich name on the letterhead. And the current management team, as Tad asked, will evaluate. Keep the ones who are competent and committed. Let go of the dead weight, probably 30% turnover in the first 6 months. 30%. Tad thought about the people who'd worked for his father for decades. Good people, loyal people, who'd be deemed dead weight because they couldn't adapt fast enough to the new reality. But that was the price of survival. Cut the infected limb or lose the whole body. Agreed, Tad said. His phone buzzed. Text from his broker. Liquidation complete. $4.3 million ready to wire. Confirm account details. One domino, standing firm. Tad sent back the wire instructions. Felt a piece of his safety net dissolve into numbers on a screen. His mother's trust fund. Gone. His savings. Gone. Everything he'd built for himself in 23 years. Gone. All of it bet on a company he'd helped destroy and a chance to rebuild it. Another text. This one from David Chen's fund manager. $2 million wired. Confirm receipt. Tad checked his account. The number appeared. $2 million from a man he'd met on the phone 12 hours ago. A man who trusted him based on one conversation and a shared history of being played by smarter predators. That left his father's $4 million. Tad had the check, just needed to deposit it. He pulled out his phone, called Sterling. You close yet? His father answered. 42 hours out. But I need to deposit your check. Want to confirm you're sure about this. You calling to give me an out? I'm calling to make sure you understand what you're risking. If this fails, you lose $4 million. Your retirement, your security. Sterling laughed, rough and dry. Son, I'm 78 years old with 2 strokes in 2 weeks. My retirement is whatever time I have left before the third one kills me. I'd rather spend that time knowing I tried to save my life's work than sitting on a pile of money I can't take with me anyway. Dad, deposit the damn check. Stop trying to protect me. I'm a grown man. Made my own choices for 60 years. I'll make this one too. Tad felt something loosen in his chest. Okay, I'll deposit it. And Thaddeus, yes. When this is over, win or lose, we're good. You and me, I'm proud of you for trying. That's worth more than $4 million. The line went dead before Tad could respond. He sat there holding the phone, feeling the weight of his father's faith, the terrible responsibility of it. Garrison was watching him. Your father's all in. Then we have 90.3 million committed. We're still 300,000 short of 90 million with fees and closing costs, but that's close enough. Wire the money to the escrow account. I'll cover the gap. Tad nodded, began typing wire instructions into his phone. $90 million, moving from here to there, from them to us, from raiders to builders, if everything went right, if nothing fell apart, if. We need to talk about the unions, Chen said, looking up from his laptop. United Steelworkers represents 70% of your workforce. They're not going to love this deal. Why not? Tad asked. We're saving their jobs. We're saving some jobs. Garrison's projections assume 20% workforce reduction over 18 months. The union will fight that. Garrison shook his head. We don't have a choice. Can't retool the plants and keep everyone. It's math. Aerospace alloy production requires different skills. Smaller crews, more automation. We'll offer early retirement packages, retraining programs. But some jobs go away. That's reality. Then we need to talk to them now, Chen insisted. Before closing, get buy-in. Otherwise, we're walking into a labor war on day one. We talk to them, they'll demand concessions we can't afford, Garrison countered. Better to close first, then negotiate from a position of strength. Better to be honest, Tad said quietly. Both men looked at him. My father always said, you don't surprise the union. You bring them in early, treat them like partners. They'll fight you if they feel blindsided, but if they feel respected, they'll work with you. Garrison considered this. Your father ran a different kind of shop than I do. My father ran a shop that survived 60 years. How many of your acquisitions made it that long? It was a bold thing to say, bordering on insolent, but Tad was tired of playing nice. Tired of deferring to people who claimed to know better. The Morrisseys had known better, and they'd almost destroyed him. Garrison smiled, actually smiled. Fair point. Okay, set up a meeting with the union leadership. Tonight, if possible. We'll lay out the plan, take our lumps, see if we can get them on board. Tad pulled out his phone, called Mike Torres, president of Local 1742, the Union Hall. Torres answered on the third ring. Mike, it's Tad Aldrich. I heard about your situation. Heard the Morrisseys got you by the throat. That was true. Now I'm trying to fix it. I need to meet with you and the executive board. Tonight, 7 p.m. It's important. What's this about? About saving jobs, about the future of Aldrich Steel, about doing this right instead of letting corporate raiders tear us apart. Torres was quiet. Then, you got 90 minutes, 7 p.m. at Union Hall. But Tad, you better not be wasting our time. These guys worked through hell the last 2 years. They deserve straight talk. Straight talk, I promise. See you at 7. Tad hung up, looked at Garrison. We're on. What are you going to tell them? The truth, all of it. The Morrissey takeover, the asset stripping plan, our counter-proposal, the restructuring timeline, the job cuts, everything. That's a lot of truth to dump on guys who just want to keep their paychecks coming. They're not stupid. They've seen the writing on the wall for 2 years, revenue down, orders down, layoffs coming eventually no matter what. At least this way they hear it from me, not from a consultant with a spreadsheet. Chen nodded approvingly. Honesty builds trust. Trust makes hard decisions easier to accept. Or it makes them angrier because they can't argue with facts, Garrison said. But he didn't object. Fine, we'll do it your way. But I'm coming with you. They need to see who's taking over. Need to understand this isn't some finance guy swooping in to strip and flip. Agreed. Tad checked his watch. 4 p.m. 3 hours until the union meeting. 38 hours until closing. His phone rang. Jennifer Hayworth. I need that comment, she said without preamble. My editor's holding space for tomorrow's front page of the business section. I need to know what to write. What have you got so far? I've got the Morrissey takeover, the asset stripping pattern, the employee impact. What I don't have is the counter-narrative. You told me you'd have something by today. Do you? This was the gamble. Tell her about the deal before it closed and risk spooking the Morrisseys, or stay quiet and miss the PR opportunity. But the Morrisseys already knew. The paperwork was being drafted. The wires were being prepared. It was happening. Off the record first, Tad said. On background. We have a deal. Warren Garrison is leading a consortium to buy Aldrich Steel from Morrissey Capital for $90 million. Cash close in 38 hours. The plan is to restructure for aerospace alloy production. Save approximately 80% of jobs long-term. He could hear typing. Rapid and intense. Garrison Aerospace, the defense contractor. Yes. Why would he want a Rust Belt steel mill? Vertical integration. He has contracts that need domestic high-grade alloy suppliers. Current vendors can't meet specs. Aldrich has the facilities and expertise to retool if we invest in upgrading. How much investment? $30 million over 3 years. More typing. And the job cuts, you said 80% survive. What about the other 20%? Early retirement packages. Retraining programs. We'll try to minimize impact, but aerospace production requires different skills. Smaller crews. Some positions become redundant. That's still 400 jobs. 400 jobs over 18 months is better than 2,000 jobs in 6 months, which is what happens if the Morrisseys liquidate. Silence, then you're right, it is better, but it's not a happy ending. No, it's not, but it's the best ending we can manage. Sometimes that has to be enough. Can I quote you on that? Yes. Okay, I'll write it, but Tad, if this falls apart, if Garrison backs out, if the deal collapses, I'm writing that too. I'm writing that you promised salvation and delivered disappointment. You understand? I understand. And if we fail, you should write that. People deserve to know when their leaders let them down, even if it destroys your reputation. My reputation is already destroyed. I'm the idiot who handed his family's company to corporate raiders. Best I can hope for now is to be the idiot who learned his lesson and tried to fix it. Hayworth was quiet for a moment. That's a better story than I expected. Okay, look for the article tomorrow morning, front page business section. It'll put pressure on the Morrisseys to close clean. Might help. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't make me regret writing something positive about you. She hung up. Tad looked at Garrison and Chen. We're going public. Wall Street Journal tomorrow morning, the story of our counter-proposal. Garrison raised an eyebrow. Risky. If anything goes wrong in the next 38 hours, we look like fools. If anything goes wrong in the next 38 hours, we are fools. Might as well be public fools fighting for something that matters, instead of private fools who stayed quiet. Chen laughed. I like this version of you better than the one I read about, the one who got played by the Morrisseys. The Morrisseys taught me something valuable, Tad said. They taught me that shame is useful, not wallowing in it, but letting it drive you to do better, to be better. I'm ashamed of what I did, what I let happen. That shame is fuel now. Garrison stood, grabbed his coat. Then let's go use that fuel. We've got a union meeting in 3 hours. I want to stop by plant number 2 first, see it with my own eyes, understand what we're buying. They took Garrison's car, a Lincoln Town car with a driver who'd been with him for 20 years. The drive to Pennsylvania took 90 minutes. Traffic was light. The city gave way to suburbs. Suburbs gave way to industrial towns that had seen better days. Aldrich Steel's plant number 2 sat on 40 acres along the Monongahela River. Red brick buildings from the 1940s, smokestacks that had once belched black clouds now stood quiet. The parking lot was half empty. Third shift didn't start for another hour. They parked near the main entrance. Tad used his key card, still worked. The Morrisseys hadn't revoked his access yet. Inside the plant smelled like metal and oil and 60 years of hard work. The machinery was old but maintained. The floors were clean. Men took pride in this place. Even as it died, they kept it running with dignity. Garrison walked slowly through the facility, touching equipment, checking specifications on machinery, reading the production logs hanging on clipboards. This is good steel, he said finally. Old equipment, needs upgrading, but the fundamentals are solid. The crews know what they're doing. Can you make it work? Tad asked. I can make it work if they'll work with me. That's what tonight's about, convincing them this isn't another corporate vulture picking the bones. This is a real attempt at transformation. They spent an hour walking the plant. Garrison made notes, asked technical questions, talked to the handful of workers prepping for third shift. One older man, maybe 60, stopped Garrison. You the new owner? Might be, if the deal closes. You gonna keep us running or shut us down like everyone else? Garrison met his eyes. I'm gonna try to keep you running. Can't promise success, can promise honest effort. That good enough? The man thought about it, extended his hand. Name's Eddie, been here 38 years. Worked with Tad's grandfather when I started. Good man, treated us fair. You do the same, we'll make it work. Garrison shook his hand. Deal. They left the plant at 6:30, drove 10 minutes to the Union Hall, a squat building with a faded sign and pickup trucks filling the parking lot. Inside, 30 men sat in folding chairs. Union leadership, shop stewards, the guys who spoke for 2,000 workers. Mike Torres stood at the front, 55 years old, 30 years at Aldrich Steel before moving into union leadership. He knew every man in this room, knew their families, their struggles. Gentlemen, Torres said, Tad Aldrich is here to talk about the future of our plant. I told him he gets 90 minutes of straight talk, so let's hear it. Tad stood. Garrison beside him. Chen stayed seated in the back. Thank you for coming, Tad started. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. 6 months ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I trusted the wrong people. I signed over my family's shares to corporate raiders who planned to liquidate this company and eliminate every job. That's on me. My mistake. My fault. The room was silent, hostile, but listening. 2 days ago, I learned the full truth. Learned that the Morrisseys never intended to save Aldrich Steel. They intended to strip it, sell the equipment, sell the real estate, walk away with $40 million in profit while 2,000 families lost their livelihoods. A murmur ran through the crowd, angry, bitter. So I called in every favor I had, found investors willing to bet on this company, and we put together a counter-proposal. $90 million to buy Aldrich Steel from the Morrisseys. Not to liquidate, to operate. To transform. Torres crossed his arms. Transform how? Garrison stepped forward. My name is Warren Garrison. I run Garrison Aerospace. We build components for defense contractors. F-16 submarines, missile systems. All of them need high-grade steel alloys. Alloys your plant has the capability to produce if we invest in retooling. How much investment? Someone called out. 30 million over 3 years. New furnaces, new processing equipment, new quality control systems. We turned plant number 2 into a specialty alloy facility serving defense contracts. And how many jobs? Torres asked. Here it was, the hard part. Right now you have 2,000 employees across 2 plants, Garrison said. Under the restructuring plan, plant number 1 continues basic steel production with reduced capacity, 800 jobs. Plant number 2 converts to aerospace alloys, 400 jobs. That's 1,200 total. The room erupted, angry voices shouting. Torres banged a gavel on the table. Let him finish. Garrison waited for quiet. I know that's an 800-person reduction. I know that's devastating. But here's your alternative. The Morrisseys liquidate. 2,000 jobs gone in 6 months. 0 survivors. We're offering 60% job retention, plus early retirement packages for anyone over 55 with 20 years of service, plus retraining programs for workers who want to learn new skills. What kind of packages? Someone asked. 50,000 per year of service, up to 20 years, max 1 million, healthcare coverage for 5 years, pension fully funded. Tad watched the math happening in 30 heads simultaneously, guys calculating what they'd get, whether it was enough. That's expensive, Torres said. Where's that money coming from? It's part of the restructuring capital, Chen said from the back. We're allocating 10 million of the 30 million investment to worker transition because we need the remaining workforce committed, engaged, giving their best effort. You can't get that if you're screwing the guys who leave. Torres studied them. When does this happen? We closed the purchase in 36 hours, Tad said. We announced the restructuring plan 1 week later. Early retirement offers go out immediately. Anyone who takes them has 90 days to transition. Retraining programs start in 3 months. And if we say no, Torres asked, if the union votes to strike rather than accept job cuts, Garrison's voice went hard, then the deal falls apart. The Morrisseys liquidate, everyone loses. You can strike all you want. Can't strike at a company that doesn't exist. The room went quiet, the ugly truth settling in. You're asking us to choose who stays and who goes, an older man said. You're asking us to decide which of our brothers lose their jobs. No, Tad said. We're asking you to help us save as many jobs as we can. The decision to cut jobs isn't yours. It's math. It's market forces. It's the reality that steel production has changed and our old model doesn't work anymore. What is yours is how we make this transition. Do we do it with dignity? With support? With care for the people who leave? Or do we fight each other while the company burns? Torres stood. We need to caucus. Discuss this among ourselves. Can you give us 30 minutes? Take an hour, Garrison said. This is the most important decision your membership will face. Take the time to get it right. They filed out, stood in the parking lot. Tad lit a cigarette he'd bummed from Garrison despite not having smoked since college. How do you think it went? Chen asked. Hard to say, Garrison replied. They're pissed, but they're also realists. They know the plant's been dying. Question is whether they trust us to actually follow through on the promises. Do we? Tad asked. Follow through? Garrison looked at him. I do. Can't speak for what happens in 5 years if this doesn't work. But for the next 3 years, every promise we made in there, I'll keep. Because I remember what it's like to lose a factory job. My father, Torres's father, Eddie's father. Whole generations of men built this country in places like that plant. They deserve to go out with dignity if they have to go out at all. 45 minutes later, Torres came outside. We voted, 23-7. We'll support the deal, with conditions. Name them, Garrison said. 1, you give us quarterly updates on restructuring progress. No surprises. Agreed. 2, any worker who gets laid off during restructuring gets first right of refusal for new positions when you're hiring. Agreed. 3, you keep the Aldrich name on the building. This company meant something to this town for 60 years. Don't erase that. Garrison looked at Tad. Tad nodded. Agreed, Garrison said. Aldrich Steel Industries, a Garrison aerospace company. How's that? Torres extended his hand. That works. Good luck, gentlemen. You're going to need it. They shook, got in the car, drove back to Manhattan. Nobody spoke for the first hour, processing, thinking about what had just happened. Finally, Chen broke the silence. That was the hardest thing I've done in 10 years of private equity. Looking those men in the eyes and telling them 800 of their brothers are losing their jobs. It gets harder, Garrison said. Wait until you're the one deciding which 800. That's when you learn what you're made of. Tad watched Pennsylvania slip away behind them, small towns with churches and bars and homes where steelworkers lived, where they'd lived for generations, building America, raising families, living quiet lives of dignity and hard work. 800 of them would lose that soon, lose the joys that defined them, the purpose that gave their days meaning. But 1,200 would keep it, would get a chance to learn new skills, build new things, carry forward the legacy. 60% wasn't 100%, but it was better than zero. Sometimes that has to be enough. They reached Manhattan at 11 p.m., 30 hours until closing. Tad went back to his apartment, collapsed on the couch, didn't bother taking off his shoes. His phone buzzed. Text from his father. Saw the union meeting went well. Torres called me, said you did good. Proud of you, son. Tad smiled, felt something warm in his chest, pride. Not in himself, in his father's pride in him. Another text, Jennifer Hayworth. Article is live online. Print edition tomorrow. You're going to get attention. Be ready. Tad pulled up the Wall Street Journal website. Front page of the business section. Corporate raider deal challenged by family buyback attempt. The article was fair, detailed. It outlined the Morrissey takeover, the asset stripping pattern, Tad's mistake in signing the proxy, but also the counter-proposal, Garrison's involvement, the union's conditional support. It ended with a quote from Tad. Sometimes the best ending we can manage isn't a happy ending. It's just the least destructive ending. 800 jobs lost is a tragedy, but 2,000 jobs lost is a catastrophe. We're choosing tragedy over catastrophe and calling it victory because that's all that's available. Tad read it 3 times, wondered if his grandfather would have approved. His grandfather who'd built the company with bare hands and immigrant determination. Probably not. The old man would have found a way to save all 2,000 jobs, would have worked 20-hour days and mortgaged his house and sold his car before laying off a single worker. But Tad wasn't his grandfather, wasn't even his father, was just a 23-year-old who'd made a catastrophic mistake and was trying desperately to limit the damage. That would have to be enough. His phone rang, unknown number. At 11:47 p.m., he almost didn't answer, then decided what the hell, nothing could make this day worse. Aldrich, it's Kyle Morrissey. Tad sat up. What do you want? I read the journal article. Cute, playing the sympathy card, making us look like villains. You are villains. A laugh, cold and sharp. We're businessmen. You're learning to be one too. I'm actually impressed. 6 months ago, you were a naive kid with an MBA and delusions of genius. Now you're playing chess, using the press, negotiating with unions, building coalitions. I taught you well. You taught me what not to become. Did I? Because from where I'm sitting, you're doing exactly what we did. You found pressure points, you exploited them. You created a narrative that serves your interests. The only difference is we're honest about what we are. You're pretending to be noble. The difference is I'm trying to save jobs. You're trying to eliminate them. We're both trying to maximize value. You just frame it differently. But Tad, here's something to think about. In 5 years, when Garrison's restructuring fails, when the defense contracts don't materialize, when you have to make another round of cuts, what will you tell yourself then? That you were noble, that you trust, or will you finally admit that some businesses deserve to die and pretending otherwise just prolongs the suffering? Some businesses deserve to die. Aldrich Steel isn't one of them. We'll see. 29 hours until closing. Wire transfers are scheduled. Our lawyers are ready. Unless you're getting cold feet. No cold feet? Good, because that $5 million in liquidated damages is still on the table if you back out. I'd hate to have to bankrupt you personally after you've worked so hard to save your company. We'll close. See you at the finish line. Looking forward to it. And Tad, what? When this is over, when Garrison's experiment succeeds or fails, call me. I'll hire you. You've got potential, real potential. Just need to shed the sentimentality and embrace the math. I'll pass. Your loss. Good luck tomorrow. You'll need it. The line went dead. Tad sat in the darkness of his apartment, thinking about Kayul's words, about whether there was any truth in them. Was he just a better-dressed version of the Morrisseys, a raider with a conscience instead of cold calculation? No, because the Morrisseys never asked themselves that question. never wondered if they were the villains, never lost sleep over the 800 jobs they'd eliminate without a second thought. The fact that Tad did that, he felt the weight of it that made him different. Not better necessarily, not noble, just different. And right now, different was all he had. 29 hours until closing. 29 hours until he'd know if this desperate gamble paid off or if he'd just delayed the inevitable. 29 hours until 2,000 families learned their fate. Tad closed his eyes, tried to sleep, failed. So he opened his laptop, began reviewing the closing documents one more time, checking every clause, every provision, every potential trap. Because Kyle was right about one thing. This was chess. And in chess, the game isn't over until someone says checkmate. Tad wasn't ready to say it yet. Neither were the Morrisseys. Tomorrow would decide who was stronger, who was smarter, who wanted it more. Tad intended to find out. 24 hours left. December 17th, 1987. 5 o'clock a.m. Tad hadn't slept. Sat at his kitchen table surrounded by closing documents, coffee cups, and the weight of 2,000 futures. His phone buzzed. Marcus, his broker. All liquidations confirmed. 4.3 million wired to escrow. You're officially broke, Tad. Thanks, Marcus. One domino. Standing, another buzz. Chen's fund manager. 2 million confirmed. 2 dominoes. His father's check. Already deposited. 4 million. 3 dominoes. Garrison's 80 million. Committed but not wired until closing. Everything depended on today. At 9 a.m. Tad arrived at Sullivan and Cromwell's offices. 42nd floor. Conference room overlooking Central Park. The kind of room where empires changed hands over fountain pens and signatures. Warren Garrison was already there. David Chen. 3 lawyers Tad had never met. And across the table like wolves at a negotiation, Cale and Donovan Morrissey. Gentlemen, the lead attorney said, we're here to close the acquisition of Aldrich Steel Industries. Purchase price $90 million. Cash transfer to occur upon execution of documents. Cale smiled. Cold. Predatory. Before we proceed, there's a small matter we need to address. Tad's stomach dropped. Our accountants completed their final review last night, Cale continued. Found a discrepancy. Inventory valuation on plant number 2's raw materials. Your books show 8.2 million. Our assessment shows 6.4 million. That's a $1.8 million gap. Material adverse change, Donovan added. Per clause 17, we're within our rights to renegotiate or walk. The room went silent. Garrison's jaw clenched. Chen looked at Tad. The lawyer started flipping through documents. This was it. The trap, the final play. Tad thought fast. Inventory valuation, different methodologies. FIFO versus LIFO, depreciation schedules. 50 ways to interpret the same pile of steel. That's not a material adverse change, Tad said quietly. That's a difference in accounting methods. It's $1.8 million, Cale said. Sounds material to me. You knew about this methodology difference 6 weeks ago when you started due diligence. You're raising it now 12 hours before closing to create leverage. That's bad faith negotiation. Cale leaned back. So sue us. Oh wait, you can't afford lawyers anymore. You liquidated everything. Garrison stood. This is bullshit and you know it. We're closing at 90 million as agreed or we're walking. Your choice. Walk then, Donovan said. We'll liquidate. Still make our 40 million, and Tad here loses 5 million in liquidated damages for failing to close. Bankrupts him for life. Tad felt the walls closing in. They had him cornered. Accept a price reduction or lose everything. Then he remembered. Jennifer Hayworth. The Journal. Public pressure. Here's what's going to happen, Tad said, pulling out his phone. I'm going to call the Wall Street Journal right now. Tell them Morrissey Capital is using accounting gimmicks to extract additional value after signing a binding agreement. The story will run tomorrow. Front page. About how corporate raiders manufacture last-minute crises to renegotiate done deals. He started dialing. Your reputation survives 1 critical article, Tad continued. Maybe 2. But 3 for every deal you touch from now on, people will remember. The Morrisseys who nickel and dime at the finish line, who can't be trusted to honor their own agreements. Cale's smile faded. So here's my offer, Tad said. We close at 90 million right now. Or I make that call and you spend the next 5 years rebuilding credibility you're about to destroy over $1.8 million. Your choice. The room was silent. Tad's finger hovered over the call button. 30 seconds, 60. Cale looked at Donovan, some silent communication. Close it, Cale said finally. 90 million, as agreed. Tad lowered his phone, felt his heart hammering. The lawyer sprang into action. Documents shuffled, signatures executed, wire transfer instructions confirmed. At 4:47 p.m. it was done. Aldrich Steel Industries belonged to the Garrison Chen Aldrich Consortium. Tad walked out of that building with $0 in his bank account, $5 million in personal liability if anything went wrong, and the fragile hope that he'd just saved 1,200 jobs. His phone rang. Sterling, "We did it, Dad." "You did it, son. I just wrote a check. You fought the war. Now the hard part begins. Now you learn what I learned 40 years ago. Signing papers is easy. Keeping promises is hard." 6 months later, plant number 2, June 1988. The retooling was brutal. 400 workers took early retirement packages. Tad shook every hand, looked them in the eyes, thanked them for decades of service. Eddie, the 60-year-old who'd worked with his grandfather, took his $1 million package. "You did right by us, Tad. Your grandfather would have done the same. I'm sorry it had to be this way." "Don't be sorry. Be successful. Make our sacrifice mean something." The new furnaces arrived. The training program started. Garrison brought in aerospace engineers to teach old steel workers new tricks. Tad worked 80-hour weeks, slept in his office, learned every aspect of specialty alloy production, and slowly, painfully, plant number 2 transformed. 18 months later, December 1989, first major delivery to Garrison's defense contractor. The batch failed quality inspection. Tad stood in the conference room as the rejection letter was read aloud. 20 tons of specialty alloy, $600,000 in materials. Worthless. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Garrison said. "We don't have the expertise. We rushed the timeline. Maybe the Morrisseys were right. Maybe some businesses should die." "No," Tad said. "We fix it. We figure out what went wrong. We adjust the process. We deliver. And if we can't, then we fail trying to do the right thing. But we don't quit. Not after 1,200 people bet their futures on us." They didn't quit. They hired better metallurgists, refined the process, ran smaller test batches, failed 17 more times. The 18th batch passed. 3 years later, December 1990, company financials came in, $22 million EBITDA, profitable, growing, 1,200 workers still employed. Sterling Aldrich died peacefully in his sleep. December 23rd, age 79. At the funeral, Mike Torres spoke. "Sterling Aldrich taught us that a man's word matters. That loyalty isn't old-fashioned. That 2,000 families aren't a line item on a spreadsheet. His son forgot that for a while, but he remembered, and he fought like hell to keep his father's promises." Eddie attended, along with 300 current and former workers. Tad stood at his father's grave and whispered, "We made it, Dad. Not the way you would have, but we made it." 10 years later, May 1998, Tad Aldrich, age 33, CEO of Aldrich Steel Industries. Warren Garrison had retired at 68, handed the reins to the young man he'd once called to offer an impossible deal. The company was worth $280 million, employed 1,400 people, 3 new plants, defense contracts with Boeing, Lockheed, Northrop Grumman. A letter arrived, return address Phoenix, Arizona. "Dear Mr. Aldrich, you don't remember me. I was one of the 400 who took early retirement in 1988. Used my package to move to Phoenix and start a small machine shop. We just signed our first $1 million contract. I wanted to thank you, not for the money though, that helped, for the dignity, for looking me in the eye when you shook my hand, for treating me like a man who'd given 30 years to your family's company, not like a problem to eliminate. Your grandfather hired me in 1958. Your father kept me employed through 3 recessions. You let me leave with my head high. That's 3 generations of Aldrichs who kept their word. Thank you, Eddie Kowalski." Tad folded the letter, put it in his desk drawer next to his father's Mont Blanc pen. Then he walked down to plant number 2, stood on the observation deck, watched molten alloy pour into molds, watched workers in protective gear operate machinery his grandfather never could have imagined. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Aldrich, it's Kyle Morrissey. Congratulations on the success. I read about your Boeing contract in the journal. What do you want?" "Just to say I was wrong. About you, about the company. You pulled it off, against odds I wouldn't have taken. Thank you, I think. My offer still stands. If you ever want to join us, you've proven you have what it takes." Tad looked out at the plant floor, at the workers building something real, something that mattered. "I appreciate the offer, Cale, but I'm exactly where I belong." He hung up. stood there watching steel transform into something stronger, something useful, something that would hold up buildings and bridges and aircraft carriers. His grandfather had built with steel and sweat. His father had built with loyalty and promises kept. Thaddeus Aldrich had rebuilt with both, and he'd learned what they always knew. Some things can't be measured in quarterly earnings. Some victories aren't about profit margins. Some battles are worth fighting even when the odds say you'll lose. Because 2,000 families aren't a spreadsheet. They're people, and people are worth fighting for. Even when you're scared, even when you've made mistakes, even when smarter, more experienced men tell you to give up. Tad Aldrich had learned that lesson the hardest way possible, by almost forgetting it, by losing everything, by fighting his way back. And now standing in a plant his grandfather built, that his father defended, and that he'd saved, Tad finally understood what the Aldrich name really meant. Not empire, not wealth, not legacy, simply this: we keep our promises, we protect our people, we build things that last, everything else is just details.